All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Here's Johnny.
Vanity. Definitely my favorite sin.
I am the devil, and I am here to do the devil's work.
The power of Christ compels you.
This is my boomstick.
What's your favorite scary movie?
Horrorheads, and welcome to Shiver, a horror movie podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Daniel DeBona.
And I'm David Ulloa.
And last week, we found ourselves firmly in Dave's wheelhouse with a black and white classic Universal monster film. Well, now we're going to take it and we're going to go deep, deep into the world of my wheelhouse. And we are doing an entire month of folklore monsters. This is one that kind of just came to me as a divine inspiration as we were wrapping up last month. And so then I kind of went out of my way to try to find some stuff that I'd never heard of. You know, we've done Antlers in the past. I had Nick Hardy on to do Antlers. That's a Wendigo. We've done a couple of
Very
these
grateful
things.
you guys did that one without me.
Yeah, you should be. Yeah, absolutely should be. So I tried to make sure I found good ones, right? Because nobody wants to listen to us talk about the Mothman prophecies. So we got out. So I went out and tried to find some stuff, and it turns out that there is some really good stuff out there. A lot of it being foreign. So we're gonna do a couple of foreign ones this month. We're gonna have some fun, but we're starting in Norway with a very old folklore monster. So in a section that we're calling Enter the Folk Monster, we're going to talk about the fact that this week we're doing the movie Troll Hunter, which features trolls. Go figure. So one that is brand new to both of us. Dave, give me your initial thoughts on Troll Hunter.
This is one that not upon release was on my radar, but this is one that I feel like very quickly came upon my radar. It's one of these movies that I feel like made the horror circuit. And if you're into horror, you very quickly got word of this thing, whether it was on Bleeding Cool. I still get on Bleeding Cool from time to time. And it was one that I feel like I read a lot about, and I just didn't have a way to see it when it first came out. And as time went on, more and more movies got added to that list of movies I had to watch, and it just kind of fell by the wayside. So as soon as you said Troll Hunter, I was like, man, finally, I've got an excuse to watch this movie now. And boy, am I glad I did. I really enjoyed this movie. I didn't know what to think of this. In fact, I didn't even know it was found footage.
I did not either
until it started. Once the the wording comes up, I'm like, oh, okay, fantastic. I haven't seen a found footage movie in I don't know how long. Since we did that one with the devil worshippers.
I
can't remember what it's called, and probably for good reason. But I haven't seen a good found footage horror movie in a while, I think.
Are you forgetting that we did session 9 or?
I haven't seen a good found footage horror movie in quite some time. So it was refreshing because I do like the genre of found footage. I also really enjoy folk monsters. So now, not to the level that you do. You take the cryptid folk monster thing to a whole nother level. So this is definitely your wheelhouse. I was more excited for you.
Yeah, so this is one that I did the same kind of thing with, right? Like I remember seeing it kind of pop up as something to watch, and then it just wasn't readily available, and you just kind of forget about these things because we're inundated with new stuff all the time. And so it kind of fell by the wayside. So as I started doing my research, this is one that popped up, and I was like, yes, absolutely. Yes. We've got to do this one. This would be a great one to start with. But I too had absolutely no idea what to expect other than trolls. I didn't know, when I first pulled this thing up on Max to watch it, the photo that it like frames for you to get started is the huge troll. And I was like,
Right.
okay, didn't even know that I should be expecting like big ones like that. Right. And so,
I was expecting like Shrek.
yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. I was
Mhm.
expecting that as well. And so I had no idea what to expect. It starts up and I'm like, okay, found footage. Let's go. Like I knew it was, I'm going to say I knew it was Scandinavian. I'm not even going to say I was 100% sure it was Norwegian
Right.
before I started it. But I ended up really liking it. They did a very good job of balancing the cheesy, back and forth that you always get in these found footage films. These ones that are Late Night with the Devil is essentially a found footage film.
Oh, you are
There we go.
correct. That is a found footage.
But they did a really good job of balancing the cheesy dialogue that you get, because it's unscripted and all the kind of back and forth. They did a really good job of outweighing that with the stuff that was insanely intriguing. What was
Mhm.
really good about this movie was how tense it was at times, even when the trolls weren't around. When this movie very
Yes.
first opens and they think they're just looking for a poacher who's out here getting bears. And so you're immediately kind of thrown into a tense situation, kind of wondering when the horror starts. And what they did a very good job with was keeping that tension all throughout the movie. So I really liked how it kind of stretched through the whole thing. I think that it developed in a way that made a lot of sense and it felt real. It felt super real. Where, and I mean they immediately come in, they're like, we of course had this footage checked by experts and they can't
Right.
find that it's been edited at all, blah blah. And it's like, okay, yeah, I mean, I get that you have to say that. That's part of the gimmick. But as the movie went on, I did find myself thinking that it felt realistic.
Mhm.
It didn't feel super fairy tale-ish. It did a very good job of telling that dark side of the folk monster, which so many of these that we're going to do have been just absolutely infantilized
Yeah.
in what they were when they began. So many of these things have become fairy tale monsters that we forget that in their origins they were horrifying things. The idea of the troll coming from Norse mythology and Scandinavian folklore being that, I mean, yeah, they started off and they kind of had this very similar thing to elves and gnomes and things like that, but they eventually, the word that they would use, which is if you've heard us massacre the Korean language and Japanese language before, watch us massacre some Norwegian here. The word troll, which comes from Jotun, which it started off as just kind of their version of the elf, but then it took
Right.
off into its own thing where they had family units and they weren't necessarily evil as much as they were just older than people. So were they monsters or were they just defending their territory? It got into all of that and it gave that story really well. And I appreciated that.
That yeah, and we're kind of already moving in that direction. So let's kind of go there. So in a section we're calling found footage Norwegian style. That is, I think, for me, the thing that was most interesting was the story itself and how they wove pseudoscience into this thing and government conspiracy into this thing. Which,
Yes.
if there's anything that is more intimately tied to folk monsters than conspiracy theories, I don't know what it is.
Right.
Because I don't know how many times I've heard some crackpot say, like, yeah, man, birds aren't real. And it's all a government conspiracy, the skunk ape, that's the one down here in Florida. Skunk ape is real.
They just
And
don't
and,
want
and
you
they
to
just
know.
don't want you to know about it. But I seen it. They always seen it. They never saw it. They seen it.
They seen it. Yeah.
Right? Yeah, they seen it. That's it. Jersey Devil, Chupacabra, like it's all a government conspiracy. So I really love that aspect of it. What is it that for you like works about this story in particular?
So like I was talking about at the top, the progression of this story makes it feel like you're along for the ride, which is what a good found footage movie should do. If you're going to sell a found footage movie, then I need to feel like I'm in the passenger seat, and there's no exposition or something that the main characters had that I don't have. There are no previous life experiences that are putting them into this situation. I've got to feel like I couldn't have been ready for this because they weren't ready for this. I have to feel like a character in a movie, in a found footage film, for it to be effective. And it absolutely gave me that. One of the things that this story did was it turned the camera into a character in the movie. It put us in the spot where we were not just looking through the eyes of the two different camera people in this movie. We were the camera. We were experiencing this as it happened. Their terror of the unknown came amalgamated with the fear I had of not knowing what was going on as well. And I loved that. So you start off, and like I said earlier, they think that they're just trying to catch a bear poacher because random dead bears keep popping up all over this area of Norway. And they find this guy that they think is guilty of it. They end up tracking him down, and they find out this guy's a troll hunter. And not just like he does it in his free time. This man is a contracted troll hunter that works for a secret department within the Norwegian government called the TSS, I believe, right? And they hire him when they find nests of trolls, essentially, that have to be cleared out. Where this story gets really interesting is the troll hunter himself kind of building that, Hans is his name, building that mythology as they go. So we're learning it with the main characters. So I love that. But more than anything, this story that we're given here is very reminiscent of Creature from the Black Lagoon, in the fact that we get a story of, yes, they're monsters visually and based on what we're seeing. And yes, they kill and eat people. But as he's telling stories about how long these things have been there and the reasons that he's out here killing them, which is essentially urban sprawl, you start to realize that you're not possibly on the right side of history sitting behind this camera and watching this guy kill trolls. That he's going to where they live. Yes, he waits until they kind of come out and they knock down some power lines or some trees and stuff like that. But that's really just when they find out they are somewhere. We're very quickly educated on the fact that one time they just straight went into a mountain that they wanted to drill through that they knew trolls were in. And then they sent this guy in to exterminate them. So you end up with this very weird situation of, okay, yeah, they're killing and eating people, that's for sure. But also, maybe if we just left them the fuck alone, everything would be fine. And it tells that story very well in a very different way than Creature from the Black Lagoon told it. And I loved that. So that's all great. My favorite thing about this movie is the in-depth detail that we got about these different types of trolls.
Yes.
I loved it. And we're going to talk more about the trolls later, but I loved how we had Hans, who was he just gave us all of this information and didn't just dump it on us for no reason. It wasn't useless exposition. We then ran into these different types of trolls. And I loved that. I loved that it went beyond just, oh yeah, there's some trolls and we're going to kill them. It's like, no, they have complicated family units, and they're different looking, and I love that they gave us all of that. So when we get to talking about the actual monsters later, I'll get more into that, but that was an excellent bit of storytelling.
That is for me the best thing about this as well, that it makes the lore central to the plot of the movie, that it's not just like, hey, here's a monster from folklore that we're gonna craft a story around. They are the story,
Right.
and that's such a unique approach, I think, to this, where it's like it's not just that the troll and this troll mythology is central to the plot. Like, it's not just a monster, like the story moves along because of it, but it's also somewhat of a celebration of the culture as well, because like throughout all of this, I'm picking up little things here and there, what little I know about Norse history, Norse mythology, and I'm hearing words that like I know in passing, like Jotunheim. I'm like, oh god, I know that
I know
one. I know,
Jotunheim,
yeah, I
yeah.
know that one. Yeah. Oh, so the Jotun, that's one of them. Okay, cool. It made me want to read into Norse mythology. I haven't had the time to do it because I literally finished watching this movie like just a handful of hours ago.
Right.
But man, it was so refreshing a take on the folk monster that it ties it so intimately to the history and the land. It felt like a celebration of Norway. At least it did to me. I'm not Norwegian, so I don't know. I don't know if Norwegians watch this and think like, oh, really? Like this,
Yeah.
like, but some people love Scarface, and then you talk to Cubans, and we're pretty much split. Some of us, like me, fucking love Scarface, and then there's other Cubans like, we've never been painted in a worse light. I
Right.
can't believe that movie would have been greenlit, and I'm like, you're taking it a little too seriously. But some people really do take it as like an affront, and I think that the best confirmation that I can have, if it is confirmation, that this movie is meant to be a celebration of Norse culture, is that Andre Avredal, who directed it, is Norwegian himself.
Right.
And we talked about him first episode of the year when we did Last Voyage of the Demeter.
Mhm.
And he impressed us then. And I remember us saying like, oh shit, Troll Hunter. Neither of us had seen Troll Hunter at that point.
He also did Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, which
Yes, he did.
I did with Cav when you were out of town one time.
Yeah. So I have to go back and watch that one, because I mean, as a fan of the book series, but I love this. To me, it almost felt like, and I don't know if it was purposeful, there's no way for me to prove that it was an influence on this, but it felt like Parks and Rec Norway edition. and in fact, Hans to me feels like Ron Swanson Norway edition.
There we go.
And I don't mean that as a knock. That's not to say that this isn't wholly original, because I think it's an incredibly original idea, and like, I'm ready for more of these. Like, I know that's always like the death knell of a horror series. It's like, hey, let's do a second one. But dude, there's so much mythology here that is left untapped. So many little nuggets of information that's dropped along the way. I'm like, no, give me more. I want more. And I feel like it's so rare for me to feel that at the end of a movie, where I'm like, dude, like, I don't even care if no one is involved from the original. Like, just give me another one.
Yeah, besides my like a unit in my little folklore and occult class on trolls and the Hilda folk in general, then a majority of what I know about trolls in Norway comes from the now defunct ride in Epcot Center, which I believe is now like a frozen ride, right?
It is frozen.
It's frozen now. But they used to have that great ride where you were on the boat just right in the middle, and there were just trolls everywhere. Yeah, Maelstrom.
Yeah.
And And so that was my first kind of taste of what the troll meant to Norway. Was Epcot Center. And one of the first times that I became fascinated with trolls as a folklore monster. And so I do agree with the fact that this did feel like a celebration of that, right? It didn't, because like I said, the trolls, while they were quote unquote monsters, they were never painted as inherently evil.
No.
They were just there. One of the things that I think was amazing storytelling that I think could very easily be taken two ways. So I'll tell you how I decided to take it, was the fact that the trolls could smell a Christian and hated it. Right. So you could have that idea of like, oh, well, this is somebody pushing some bullshitty agenda about Christianity being evil. Or the way that I chose to take it is these things are older than Christianity. They lived in a world where magic and wonder existed, and they watched this religion push in and force those things out of the world. With things like the Dark Ages came through, and all of that stuff was pushed to the side, and we started establishing all of these, caste systems and things like that. It pushed away all of the things that made the world that they knew and loved amazing. There's a very good reason in folklore and mythology historically for something as old as we're led some of these trolls to believe some of these trolls are. There's a very good reason for them to hate that, and it's because it came in and it wiped out their world. The Reformation and the Dark Ages, those things came in and destroyed mythology and this world that or what is for them history, what is now for us mythology. Because of those things, it pushed all of those things out and it took the world over. So there's an excellent reason for them to despise a Christian, other than, like I said, I think that it would be ridiculous to view it as just some guy's agenda to be like, oh yeah, trolls hate Christianity. I think that there's legitimate history to something this old hating it. And I loved that.
I don't think that is suggested at all. I think that is the message there, that, Norse mythology predates Christian mythology. And when Christianity becomes the dominant religion, not that it is anymore, because Islam, outnumbers Christianity like by many percentage points.
Correct.
That's something for the troll to hate.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you're diminishing me. So I'm gonna. The other thing I really liked about the way things were presented here is that, which is why it made me think of Parks and Rec, is it seems like what the TSS wants ultimately and what Hans wants are two drastically different things. The TSS is just a pawn for the Norwegian government. And ultimately that means it's a pawn for, big real estate or whatever, right? What Hans wants is to keep these things safe.
Yes, I mean,
he never wants to kill them. He never wants to kill them.
Ones he talks about, I think it's sick. I'm trying to lure it out so I can get some blood and see what's wrong with it. I mean, that's one of the very first things that we're told about him.
And the way that he recounts the tale of having to go in and basically commit genocide. It's heartbreaking the way that he's talking about it. So I really love the fact that there were like competing agendas here. Like there's the government conspiracy, the cover up, and then there's those that go along with the cover up because they see an opportunity to help preserve this very Norwegian thing.
Right.
And I love that aspect of this movie. The like, hey, there's the filmmakers that are trying to catch a poacher that end up like really all they want is they're trying to preserve the wilderness and life and the land. And that's exactly what Hans is doing. So this turns from an expose on him to an expose on the TSS. And I love that and Hans's own, like what he's doing this for are at odds with oh my god, what was his name?
Finn from the TSS.
Finn Haugen. Yeah, Finn Haugen from the TSS. And I love the fact that he is the image. Like he is the face of the TSS. And it really doesn't matter who else is behind him because he is like cigarette smoking man in X-Files.
Yeah.
That's
exactly
it.
Who he is.
He's cigarette smoking man from X-Files. He's G-Man from Half-Life. Like that's the role that he plays. And he does it so well because he sells you on it the very first time you see him. And very quickly that switch is flipped and it's like, no, fuck you.
Right.
What are you doing here? Why are these cameras on?
Yeah. And so all of that stuff, I mean, just led to an incredible movie where, yeah, you're right. Like that they're kind of fighting back against this homogenization of their culture, just becoming the same as everyone else's culture.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the last relic of old Norway. It's something that they have to hang on to. And I love that we're given characters who don't immediately necessarily view these things as evil. So, let's get into that because it is a found footage movie. So story just kind of keeps us going here, right? But we need to get into talking about the people. So in the section that we're calling filmmakers and troll hunters, we need to talk about the characters that drove this movie forward. So who are you going to take first?
Okay. It's a very small role, but I literally laughed every second that this guy had something to say. His name is Robert Stoltenberg, and he plays the Polish bear hunter.
It's so good.
What a fucking riot, this guy. Oh my God. Everything he says, and I can't remember what he says. And I'm not going to sit here and do a Polish accent either. But believe you me, that if I take anything with me from this movie, it's gonna be this guy's performance. Wow, man, I really fucking loved it. He was giving me Ralph. Oh my God, what's his name? John Ralphio from Parks and Rec, where it's just like, hey man, I just I'm doing my job, sort of thing. And he's not, he's like, who the fuck is this guy? How did he get involved in this? And then he speaks English of all things,
Right.
Like I don't know if it was just my cut of the movie, but it was the only time anything was in English was when he was there. Why this guy who does business with the Norwegian government doesn't speak the language, and neither does the Norwegians speak any Polish. I don't know why they couldn't meet somewhere in the middle and like speak Russian. I don't know what was going on here, but he was like, "Yeah, it's a Russian bear. It comes down."
Oh
for,
my God,
whatever the reason.
When he is pointing out that it's a Russian bear, he's like, "Bears wander.
Yeah.
He just ended up down here. Nobody's gonna notice or care, And he's just like shaking the whole thing off. Yeah, he was funny, and it was a nice little bit of levity, right? In a movie that starts off very heavy with this assumption that you're searching for a poacher, and then for him to come in, and it's also just such a ridiculous role, right? Like your entire job is delivering dead bears for the TSS so that they can pretend that a bear did all of this damage, not a troll. Like it's such an outlandish thing. But again, when you go back to that government conspiracy thing, right? What is a government conspiracy without at least one ridiculously outlandish role? Right. There's got to be a crinkle in it somewhere for something that's so absurd that it might just be true. Like you go and you watch the Zapruder film and it's like, why does that guy have an umbrella when the sun's out? He must have shot someone with a tranquilizer dart or whatever, and you need those moments for a conspiracy theory to thrive. So to bring that wrinkle into it was gorgeous. I love that.
Man, that is the perfect way of putting it. For the conspiracy theory to make sense, you need to have the real world connection. And that's what that guy is.
He's just a dude.
Yes, he's just a dude. I've run into that guy in Miami Beach a million fucking times.
Yeah, it's like you've got to have the one guy who just has a normal job that got roped into this, right? So he was great. I am going to go the other way, and man, I've got to talk about Otto Jesperson as Hans.
Yeah.
Holy shit. You mentioned it right before we went into characters. Man, when he gives that monologue about essentially genociding this entire mountain full of trolls, knew what he was getting himself into, but at this point he's, ass deep in this job, and this is what he's got to do. It's all he's got left. That moment was reminiscent of Quint's shark moment.
Yeah.
Right. And that was the moment where it became very, very serious and very, very dark. And you got this moment out of him. Until then, you knew, like I said, he had mentioned, I think it's sick. I'm trying to figure out what's wrong with it. But then he's also flashing this giant thing at him. We've seen him turn at least one into stone by this point. So you're still on the fence about how much is this just a job and how much did this guy get into it because he loves killing trolls, right? Because there's always somebody who gets into a job because they just really like the darkest aspects of it. And so you're still kind of on the fence about where he stands until that moment when you realize, man, no, this guy is just in kind of over his head with all of this. He can't back out now because this has become his entire life, but he's not super into it. This guy doesn't get off on killing these trolls. And that moment was amazing. But also just the just how much knowledge, the wealth of knowledge that this guy had on trolls and the way that he delivered it without ever making the people in the movie, which, like I said, on a found footage movie, I consider us to be one of the people in the movie. So the viewers, you were never made to feel stupid. You were made to feel ignorant, which is a very different thing. Ignorance being you've never had the opportunity to learn that. And he makes you aware of the fact that while these trolls are a very important part of Norwegian history, they're whitewashed, for lack of a better word now, and they're brushed aside as fairy tale creatures. They're not taught as part of history anymore. They're taught as part of mythology. And he never makes you feel stupid for not knowing about the trolls. He's just pointing out that you never had the opportunity to learn thoroughly about them because they've just been written off as a silly childhood story. And I love that he gave us all of that in a way that made me feel like I was being educated, not talked at.
Yeah, and I think that that's a really hard line to toe, especially because for him it's old hat. Like everything seems like something he's done, not just once before, but like countless times before. And like I try to equate that in my own profession. And so like you're probably very familiar with this kind of teacher, the veteran who is sitting in the teacher's lounge and in a different time probably would have been sitting there with an ashtray full of cigarette butts in front of him, drinking like 3-hour-old coffee, and is just like always has a stack of papers in front of him. Always. And the stack never goes down. Doesn't matter how many papers they've finished grading, the stack never goes down. And if you ask them for advice as a young, wet behind the ears teacher, the advice is always exactly the same. Get out now.
Yeah.
It's that sort of like, don't be me. Go live your life. Be happy. That's that sort of thing. And The interesting thing is I see myself becoming the person now. This is my 17th year as a teacher. No,
My 16th.
16th year as a teacher, and I've seen like 2 waves of teachers come in at this point. I'm seeing my own students coming back. That's really cool. But when they come to you for advice, it's like, I got no advice for you, man. You got to like run, get out now.
Grab your ass with both hands and hang on, man.
And the thing is, I love my job. I really, really love my job. I could not imagine myself doing anything else. But I think Hans is like that too. Hans could not function in the quote unquote real world. There's no way. He is too deep into this. He is literally the only guy who does this.
Right.
What I would love to see is a prequel where there are more of these troll hunters. Not so much the sequel, because I mean he goes off and like we have no idea what happens.
Right, yeah.
Right. They definitely left, that part of this, that final chapter open to interpretation. But I'm not so interested in where things go from here. I want to see like Trollmageddon. I want to see when like more trolls and more troll hunters, because he learned to troll hunt from someone.
Right.
This is an honor that has been bestowed, and a curse that has been bestowed upon him, probably by his parents before him, and by their parents before them, and
the Norwegian Van Helsings.
Yes, man, I want to see that. I want to see young Hans and Daddy Hans. And how did this come to be? How did he become this grizzled piece of meat? That has just been sitting on the grill way too long. And at this point, it's like, well, we just got to leave this shit on here because it's too tough to chew and you can't throw out food. So we're just going to have to wait and see what happens to this thing.
Yeah, he ended up becoming just such a deep character for somebody who was introduced as, a poacher. And you're expecting, you're just like, oh man, this guy's just going to be a dick. Right. and like I said, it was fascinating to me the way that they never painted him as a guy with just a bloodlust. You're right. This was a calling for him, a blessing and a curse. This was what he had to do. He's a relic. He's a relic who he's not built for the modern world. This guy just lives in a Range Rover that is specifically kitted out to hunt trolls. That's his entire world, is a killdozer style Range Rover that I mean, and that's his entire world, because he's got to go where the trolls are. He can't just set up in some Norwegian city and start a business, selling Hummel.
Right.
This is what he's got to do. He's haunted by it. And you're never led to believe anything but that from the moment he starts talking. You're never led to believe that he is anything but cursed with this knowledge that he has, and this station that he's in life. So I think that Hans ended up being an absolutely incredible character.
Agreed. If I can pick one more, I think I'm going to do the disappointing thing and continue to pick really small characters. Played by, and I'm probably butchering this name, but Newton Narum.
I knew as
power
soon as
company
you said
manager.
disappointing characters, I was like, he's going to go with the dude from the power company.
Dude, he was so funny. I found myself laughing a lot with this movie. Which is great because like it gets so dark in places, and it can be scary, I think really scary at times. As far as monster movies goes, I think that this is one of the scarier ones I think I've seen. But it's so funny in a lot of places too. Kind of like the Innkeepers, right? Because like the
Yeah.
Innkeepers like really balance that. Like things can get scary and things can get funny, but this one stuck the landing, I think. Whereas Innkeepers ultimately like left me wanting more, and not in the good way,
Right.
like this one did. This guy is just the perfect example of government employee.
Yeah.
This guy could not be bothered to think. You couldn't pay him enough money to think. Why? Because you'll still pay him money and he doesn't have to think. So why is he going to think? Like, it is the best example that I can think of like government employee. Like what I think of when I think of the DMV,
Yeah.
this fucking guy.
Yeah.
And
This is the dude that the phrase good enough for government work exists.
yes, dude, when they start talking about those power lines, and he was like, yeah, man, we looked at the pattern, and it was this circular pattern, so gotta be a tornado. And they're like, oh, would that pull those things down? He's like, oh yeah, no, these things withstand tornadoes, so
Yeah.
but it's gotta be a tornado.
There's got to be it. Yeah.
Oh man.
He's like, not
Oh,
in the manual, not my business.
right.
Yeah. No, he was like for just such a bit role,
Mhm.
brought exactly what was needed in that moment to one, just keep everything moving forward, and two, to just to bring some levity to it, because at that point we've watched them get stuck in a cave, and we've seen a guy eaten, and we know that they have to smell bad all the time. They've got to have the troll stench on them, right, or else they're going to be sniffed out, and
Yeah.
everything is falling apart in that moment, and you need just that to kind of give you a second to breathe, remind you that you're watching a movie, and you're enjoying it. And so he was great. The other side of the government employee coin here, it's got to be Finn,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
By Hans Morten Hansen, right? So again, probably massacring that. It doesn't
Yeah.
seem like I could be able to, but I
It
probably
doesn't seem like
did.
there's very many ways to mispronounce that one.
Yeah,
But
and yet I'm sure
that's when you are most likely to mispronounce it.
I did not make the connection to Cigarette Smoking Man and X-Files the way that you did, and I love that you pointed that out, because it was right on the tip of my tongue, because you're right, he was just G-Man. They gave him a name in Finn, but we don't know that that's actually his name. He definitely seems like somebody who's trained to be a ghost, to be a spook. This guy we're calling him Finn, but that's just because that's what he decided to say when he was on camera that time. This guy seems to exist in whatever role he needs to be at the time. When we first see him, he seems kind of goofy, and just he seems like power company guy at first. But as Finn comes back, and we start to see a very darker side to what his role is in the TSS. We start to see that this guy is the cleaner. This guy is the one that makes sure that everything they do stays secretive, right? This all stays on our side of the curtain, that nobody gets forward, until at the very end, as the camera drops, and we're just kind of led to believe that Finn and his crew killed these kids, or at least Abu Ghrabed them, right? Like they're
Right.
at the very least, they're at a black site somewhere, because they now have knowledge and are on film saying that they want this knowledge out in the world. And so we go from just kind of goofy guys like, I'm not going to let you keep those recordings, right? To then he's ransacking the trailer. And then, maybe he killed these kids for filming all of this stuff. We get this really weird performance out of him. One thing that I found fascinating as I was reading about this movie today is most of the people in this movie were not actors. outside of what they did. They were comedians and just like television personalities. They weren't people who were making amazing Norwegian films and then, decided to do this little found footage project. These were all people that they just kind of snagged where it's like, I bet you could be pretty good at this. I bet you could be pretty good at this. And they all kind of came in. When you look at the wiki for this, the main three, the three that it looks like we're not even really going to get to talking about, right? When you're looking at Tomas, Kale, Johanna, none of them even have blue links next to their name. They weren't doing anything before and they didn't go on to do anything after. But the ones who do almost all say Norwegian television personality and comedian. So I do love that what we got out of Finn started off as that. It started off as goofy guy, but we did get a great progression into dark G-man that makes you realize the TSS isn't just some goofy part of the Norwegian government that's out there kind of just sweeping stuff under the rugs. It's a dark thing that does seem to be tasked with destroying Norwegian history.
And I think that's solidified when there's like a post credits or mid credits scene where the president of Norway's talking and he lets slip
Norway has trolls.
Yeah, and I got major like W vibes from him. And I know nothing about it. That could have been, could have not been. I have no idea what Norway's president in 2010 looks like. I don't know what Norway's president today looks like. That was such a W thing to do.
Yeah.
And then, you cut over to Finn Haugen. There he is, and he's just looking over at him like, I'm gonna have to do a bit of fixing here, aren't I?
Yeah.
It was such a great moment where it's like, in the end, he's just like Hans. He's trying to cover up what other people are doing, and it's the conspiracy wheel, really. And once it starts turning, it never stops.
Right. He was great.
Yeah. So there's really only one thing left to talk about, and that's the trolls themselves. So something we've done all year in our year of the monster is we will have a section for the monster of the month, in this case the folk monster. So in a section we're calling Legend Has It. Daniel, we've skirted the trolls, though. What do you think of the trolls?
I think that this was such an amazing depiction of what a true Scandinavian folklore troll is. Down to the fact that we got 3 different races. We got that they exist in family groups. We got that they come in different sizes, different shapes, that they do and live in different places. All of that stuff was fucking incredible. When you look into the history of the Norwegian troll specifically, but also just the Scandinavian troll, the words that they use to describe troll are also words that they use to describe demigods, giants, demons. All of these things are words that mean troll. The troll is such a vital part of Scandinavian folklore, and I loved what they gave us here. They gave us 3 different races of trolls. We've got the bridge troll in the Ragelfant, right? And so this is the one you think of with the 3 billy goats gruff and things like that. Ones that are just kind of trying to adapt to the modern world, and so they live under bridges, right? Because that's as dark and as dank as they can get now, because they've been run out of their other places. And the way they go about trying to get the bridge troll, the Ragelfant, with the goats was you will never convince me not a direct parallel to the fact that the Three Billy Goats Gruff is such an old story, right?
Mhm.
It gives us the fact that these monsters that have now become fairy tale baddies are they represent something that was very real. So yes, the one in the Three Billy Goats Gruff is made a fool of, but this shows us how fucking serious bridge trolls are. And fuck a goat, they're just bait, right? And so so amazing off the bat. You know, we've got that one. We've got, then they get into the cave trolls with the Dovre Gubens, which they show us the family unit that they live in, and they show us that they exist. And those damn trolls in the cave, they weren't doing shit. They were literally in a cave, not even near the town. They were
just farting.
Yeah, they were literally just farting. That was that was great, right? That was amazing, because again, you take something like this and or Gilman or something like that, and depending on the type of movie you're making, it can become very important to not humanize, but maybe humanize, right? To make you realize that they're living sentient creatures. They're not just brainless oafs that are out there taking up the space that should be ours because destiny says, as a human, I deserve that. What they are is they're creatures that have families, that have brains, that have feelings. And so we get all of that. And yeah, the cave trolls eat somebody, but you know what? You were in their fucking cave. You had no business being there. You went to them. Again, we used this phrase last week. This was stand your ground. This was, you came to my home. But man, when it is all said and done, the fact that they went out there and they gave us a fucking Joe tune, right? A 60-foot troll that's everything you wanted to see this entire movie. We got the three-headed ones at the beginning too, but I forgot to write down what that one was called at the beginning. Hold on, here it is, the Tussalad, right? So we actually got 4.
Yeah.
And again, we got the knowledge of, but they can only see out of one of them. The other 2 are just, I think he used the word protuberances to scare other trolls.
Yeah.
So you find out there's a hierarchy to their society as well. The trolls in this movie are all of the evidence that you need to, I think, definitively say that this movie is a celebration of Norwegian history and Norwegian folklore, because everything that we're given in the trolls in this movie is awesome. Down to the fact that sometimes they explode, sometimes they turn to stone, all of those things having folkloric origins. They didn't make any of this up for this movie. And I think that it is absolutely impossible to watch it and not understand how they were being celebrated as a keystone of Norwegian history.
Yeah, and that is it for me too. Is that the way that I see Hans as a conservationist, as someone who is trying to preserve the trolls and keep them alive, like making sure that they're not starting turf wars with one another, that they're not, encroaching on on the human life, that that they're kind of respecting their own territory. That to me is kind of Averdal's way of saying, like, hey, we need to conserve Norwegian way of life and tradition and culture here. And to me, that's a beautiful way to use a monster to tell a bigger story. Because trolls are great, they're awesome, but if a troll is just a troll, the movie's over very quickly.
Yeah.
And the fact that they give us a troll society with troll laws, as it were, right?
Yeah.
With rules to it all. I mean, to me, that's amazing. And although I have a favorite of all of them, because definitely the Davragruben is just fucking awesome. This thing just walks in, it farts up a storm. The Christian dude ends up like slathering fucking what is it, troll scent all
Troll
over him
stench.
constantly just like lathering himself up with troll stench. And then they turn fucking feral, man. They
Yeah.
got scary there. And when those lights are popping in different directions and all you're seeing is like flash and then like fangs, and man, that was scary. It was really scary. You know, the tussle lad was scary too. It was, I think that this approach to the troll is the perfect way of weighing scary monster with deeper meaning, and throughout all of it entertaining me. And I think that that's really hard to do. That's a balancing act that not many movies get right. You end up either being a little too heavy-handed, and it's like, okay, you're beating me over the head with this message here, or it's like, okay, well, that's a great monster design, but you know, all it is a monster.
Right.
This is perfection, I think, when it comes to the use of the monster in the movie.
Yeah, I was blown away. Like I was not ready to get as much as I got here. You know, I'm sitting there watching, be like, okay, I know a little bit about trolls. You know, I'm here for this. Let's see.
Mhm.
And the way that they just expounded on all of this, and just every bit of what we got from the trolls was shown with reverence.
Mhm.
You know what? Because one thing about Hans is, even after the camera guy got eaten, we were still never led to believe that he now had hate in his heart for these things.
No. In fact, it's quite the opposite when he realizes that rabies is to blame here. He's like, "Oh, no wonder. Like they're not acting the way they normally act." Like he's spending this whole movie like telling him like these things don't normally happen. You know, or just shouting at them like, "Run! Like we gotta get the fuck out of here." You know, this is not a normal situation. So I love the fact that there was an explanation for why they were behaving so monstrous. And I mean, rabies is the perfect way of making them a monster without making them a monster.
Right. Exactly. So, I mean, they did a phenomenal job with it. I mean, top to bottom, I think we
Mhm.
got something really good here. So, I mean, let's get to it, right? It's that time where all that's really left is for us to rate this thing.
Mhm.
So, if you don't know, or you just need a quick reminder, here at Shiver, we don't rate things by stars because it's just not fair to rate one movie against another. So, we think that a movie should be rated based on giving us what they meant to give us and how much we enjoyed this movie in this moment in time. So, every week we create a unique rating system for the given movie. So we talked about a couple of things, but really when it comes down to it, a reoccurring joke and something that just has to be is we got to do it out of troll stench, right?
Yeah.
Troll stench is what sticks out with this movie. So Dave, out of a possible 5 bars of troll stench, what do you give Troll Hunter?
Listen, I can't think of a reason not to give this a perfect 5 bars of troll stench. I fucked up the first time I said it. What a fucking tongue twister. 5 bars of troll stench. Like I can't think of anything that was like wrong with this thing.
Right.
Like it was absolutely perfect. Like I laughed. I was absolutely engaged the whole time. It did take me 2 sittings to finish this movie, but it's only because I started watching last night, like literally at 11 o'clock.
Right. And that was my
And
fault.
no. I mean, that's it was my fault as well because I had the thought throughout the weekend like, oh, I should probably watch this thing, and I've just been so busy that I had no time to get to it. And then again, my own fault. I'm not going to be able to record tomorrow, so like I couldn't watch it tonight after like putting the kids to bed. So I don't like when I don't have so much time, you know, between finishing a movie and recording, but because I like to let things digest. I have a really bad habit of loving things as soon as they're done. But I have a feeling that, like, I didn't want to turn it off last night. The only reason why I did is because I was falling asleep.
Right.
And it wasn't the movie's fault. It's because I'm an old man.
Yeah, no, I can't find a single thing to knock this movie for. There was a moment early on while watching it where I was like, this thing is paced really weirdly, and maybe that's going to come back to bite it when I go to rate it. But then I realized it wasn't that it was paced oddly, it just did a great job of setting up where it was going.
Mm.
It needed to be paced that way for exactly what I talked about at the top, which is there's no exposition here. We're just part of the movie. And so for that to work, you need that pacing, because if you hit the ground running, then you feel like you missed something.
Mhm.
So it had to be paced that way at the beginning. So I ended up really liking the way it was paced. I ended up thinking that the characters did a great job kind of presenting and being everything they were supposed to be. You guys can hear my basset hound carrying on there in the background. I'm not exactly sure what's happening there. Something's got his ass fired up.
Yeah, usually it is that way.
Yeah. I spent 7 minutes talking about when we got to the trolls. I think that this was the perfect way to present this as history, not
Mhm.
as fantasy, not as mythology, but as Norwegian history. And I think that that is ultimately what puts this at 5 bars of troll stench, is the fact that never once while watching this did I feel like it was made for kids, like it was made to be
Right.
silly.
Because it is PG-13.
Right. But it was there was never, yes, there's a fart. There's a big ass fart right in the middle of the movie, right? Okay, sure. That's funny. But also, anybody who has a family knows when you're sitting around doing nothing after a long day, dad farts. It's what we do.
Yeah.
Like that's just life. So yeah, is it a funny moment? Yes. But does it do something to further the story that we're being told about these trolls? Absolutely. And so I can't find a single thing wrong, man. It is absolutely 5 bars of troll stench, and I can't wait to watch this again now that I know what I'm in for,
Right.
look to now that I'm not just shocked when I see the trolls initially. Now I can't wait to go back and watch it again and do those things with that we always do with monster movies, which is appreciate the subtleties of the design. Something that right now I couldn't necessarily appreciate because I was just so shocked the first time I saw these things. Now I can go back and appreciate the little things. I can look for the fact that the 2 heads on the side aren't actually real heads, and I can look for little things that they did to show me that. And I'm very excited to go back and watch this movie. And I've had 24 hours to let it digest. So I don't think it's just that you just saw it and you're doing that.
Well, that's it's comforting because I am always worried that, like, I just saw something and I'm giving this thing, like, the fucking, and like everything. It's like,
Right.
yeah, it's all the praises. It needs that and more. And I know I have a tendency to do that. So there you have it. That is a perfect 5 bars of troll stench. So if you stuck with us the whole time, because a few of you did, thank you so much. Chime in. If you've seen some of these movies and you're watching live, feel free to chime in and have a little bit of a repartee with us. We love that. In fact,
We do. It's one of the
yeah,
reasons we do it live.
absolutely, yeah.
Uh,
Were you gonna say
so,
something?
oh yeah. I was just gonna say. So, if you have enjoyed this one and you are excited about the fact that we are doing an entire month of folklore, we are going to bring it back home next week, we are going to be sticking with found footage. I just found out today. We are going to be sticking with found footage next week. We are going to be doing Willow Creek, which is a movie that is about Bigfoot. So we're gonna bring it back to the States. Homegrown folktale monster here in an actual horror movie about Bigfoot. Surprisingly, we're not doing Harry and the Hendersons. We did think about doing Harry and the Hendersons, but I don't have it in me emotionally right now to get through the end of Harry and the Hendersons. So we're gonna do Willow Creek, written and directed by the one, the only Bobcat Goldthwait. So very interested in where this one's going to go. Another one that's going to be brand new to both of us. Make sure you follow us at Shiver Pod, wherever you can find us. That's on all your podcast sites, all your social medias. We're at Shiver Pod on all of them. Links to all those things at shiverpod.com. Follow us. Let us know what you think. And we can't wait to hear from y'all.
Absolutely. So on behalf of all of us here at Shiver, fright you very much.